system. He writes that the American people are the problem.
Appreciated having Joe on my side when the going gets rough.
Thomas claims Americans have become too self-indulgent and says politicians are petrified to ask their voters to make short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. So does he have a point? Let's ask Liberal Radio talk show host Nancy Skinner and conservative talk host Jerry Doyle. Jerry, let's start with you. The American people, they're part of the problem, aren't they?
Well, you know, you've got an entitlement mentality in America that's been brewing for almost 4 decades, and everyone is in this mindset that the government is supposed to provide this cradle-to-grave mentality where the government is going to be there to give you. But, you know, when you rob from Peter to pay Paul, you can always count on the support of Paul. And unfortunately, I think politicians are playing into that entitlement mentality and attempting to buy votes.
Nancy, how about it?
No, I don't agree with that at all, David, because, you know, the president also said that he didn't know how the politics of this would work out, but it's the right thing to do. And I got to say, usually when you do the right thing, the politics do work out. He should know he was opposed to the war in Iraq, and when the polls were strongly for the war in Iraq, I was in that race, the primary race, with him, so I know how hard that was. And then look what happened to the polls. Eventually, the people find out, and you cannot blame the American people, because if you look back at the beginning of this, July of last year, and look at the polls, you had 50% of Republicans supporting this plan before it got demonized systematically by the right, who called it socialized medicine. It was a plan to just take this out. Now what you see, the polls as of February, 77% of Democrats still support this plan. Only 7% of Republicans support this plan. So it's partisan. He's got to do the right thing. The math will work out, and people will follow.
Jerry, isn't part of the problem that the American people have been conditioned to think that they don't need to sacrifice at all, that things will just magically change for the better, that there's no short-term sacrifice?
Well, no, people understand that you have to have skin in the game, as President Obama says, and I think people are willing to pay a fair share. It's the definition of what a fair share is. When you look at this whole health care debate, the Democrats offer some proposals that I think we should take them up on. If you think you can save $500 billion in Medicare, do it. If you think you can save tens of billions of dollars by putting medical records online and reducing redundancies in the system or the unnecessary redundancy of treatment, do it. Let's do the things that we can do that don't cost a lot. Let's get people healthy. Let's get better food choices. Let's get kids outside playing. Those things don't cost a lot. And then when we do the things that don't cost a lot, if it's not working, then we take a look at the other things that we have to do.
Nancy,
Jerry, you know what, Jerry? Go back to the budget deficit. If we don't do health care, the long-term budget deficits completely explode. And so when you talk about cost and all that, this is the right thing to do from a budget standpoint, from a moral standpoint, from a health standpoint. There is no legitimate argument at this point in our history why we should not move forward. They should take the vote and get it over with. Move on.
Nancy
agree. How can you take 16% of the budget and supposedly solve the health care problem and solve 100% of the budget? The problems in the budget are
that's because
not
we're not willing
health
to,
care.
because we're not willing to jump into some of the more difficult issues like entitlement reform. But in any case, Jerry Doyle, Nancy Skinner, thank you both so much for coming on and hanging around. We appreciate it this morning.
You bet.
By the way, we've got some breaking news. One of the most powerful, of course, committees on Capitol Hill is the House Ways and Means Committee, the committee that deals with taxing issues, taxes, and, of course, you know that Charlie